Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today's story is one that starts with a simple meal, and turns into a life-changing lesson about kindness, dignity, and the quiet battles people fight every day. So sit back, listen closely, because this story might change the way you look at the next stranger you see. It was late evening when Armin finally pushed open the glass door of the small roadside restaurant. The kind of place with flickering yellow lights, plastic chairs, and the comforting smell of fried bread and spices in the air. He was exhausted. 12 hours on a construction site had drained every ounce of strength from his body. His back ached, his hands were rough with dust and cement, and his stomach felt like it had been empty for days. All he wanted was one peaceful meal. Just him, a plate of hot food, and silence. He chose the corner table, far from the noise of the street. He dropped his bag beside his chair and leaned back with a tired sigh. For a moment, he closed his eyes. This little restaurant had become his refuge. No questions. No memories. Just food and rest. The waiter came over, and Armin ordered his usual. Rice, lentils, flatbread, and tea. Nothing fancy, just enough to quiet the hunger clawing inside him. As he waited, his thoughts drifted back to how lonely his life had become. Since his father passed away and his mother fell ill, everything had changed. Friends slowly disappeared. Responsibilities grew heavier. And solitude became his closest companion. He had learned to eat alone, walk alone, struggle alone. The food arrived, steaming and fragrant. Armin began eating quickly, barely tasting the first few bites. Hunger does that to a person. It turns food into survival instead of pleasure. That's when he noticed them. At first, he only saw the child. A small boy standing near the entrance, clutching his mother's hand. The boy couldn't have been more than 6 or 7 years old. His clothes were worn, slightly too big for his thin frame. His shoes had holes near the toes. His eyes, those eyes were what caught Armin's attention. They weren't playful or careless like most children's eyes. They were tired. Hungry. Yet still hopeful. Behind him stood the mother. She was young, perhaps in her late 20s, but hardship had aged her beyond her years. Her face was pale, her eyes rimmed with exhaustion. She hesitated near the doorway, as if unsure whether she belonged there. Armin looked down at his food, feeling a strange tightening in his chest. He told himself it wasn't his concern. He wasn't rich. He wasn't powerful. He was just a tired man trying to survive. But then the boy tugged at his mother's hand and whispered something. The mother bent slightly, whispered back, and gently shook her head. A few seconds later, she took a hesitant step forward. She walked slowly between the tables, apologizing softly as she passed each one. Most people avoided her eyes. Some frowned. Others shook their heads without even letting her speak. One man waved his hand dismissively as if shooing away a stray animal. Armin kept eating, telling himself not to look. Then the shadow fell over his table. He slowly lifted his head. The woman stood there, her eyes lowered, her hands trembling slightly. "My son is very hungry," she said in a voice barely above a whisper. "Can we stay a while? We won't disturb you." Armin froze. The words hit him harder than he expected. He glanced at the boy. The child wasn't begging. He wasn't crying. He just stood there quietly, clutching his mother's coat, staring at the food on Armin's plate with a hunger that broke something inside him. For a moment, Armin felt annoyance creep in. This was supposed to be his quiet time. His one peaceful moment in the day. He didn't want complications. He didn't want responsibility, but then he remembered his own childhood. He remembered nights when he and his mother had gone to bed with empty stomachs after his father lost his job. He remembered pretending not to be hungry so his mother could eat the last piece of bread. He remembered the shame. The silence. The waiting. Slowly, Armin pushed his plate toward the woman. "Sit," he said quietly. "Both of you." The woman's eyes widened in disbelief. "Sir, we don't want to take your—" "I can order more," he interrupted gently. "Please sit." For a second, she didn't move. It was as if her body had forgotten how to trust kindness. Then her son gently pulled her hand, and Saturday Armin called the waiter and ordered another full meal, plus extra bread and 2 cups of tea. The boy's eyes lit up like stars. He tried to hold back his excitement, but his trembling hands gave him away. As the food arrived, the woman kept saying thank you, over and over again, her voice breaking each time. The boy ate slowly at first, as if afraid the food might disappear. Then hunger took over, and he began eating eagerly but politely, chewing carefully, trying not to make a mess. Armin watched them in silence. Something about the way the mother watched her son eat, like she was seeing a miracle unfold, made his chest feel tight again. She barely touched her own food, giving most of it to the boy. Armin noticed. You should eat too, he said softly. She smiled faintly. I'm full just watching him. But Armin could see the lie. He broke off some bread and placed it on her plate. Please. After a moment of hesitation, she obeyed. Minutes passed in quiet chewing. The noise of the restaurant faded into the background. It was just 3 strangers sharing a table, bound by hunger and something unspoken. Finally, the boy wiped his mouth and looked up at Armin with wide eyes. Uncle, he said shyly, are you rich? Armin almost laughed. No, he replied. Very far from it. The boy tilted his head. Then why did you help us? Armin didn't answer right away. He searched for words that even he didn't fully understand. Because once, someone helped me when I was hungry. The boy smiled as if that made perfect sense. The mother wiped her eyes discreetly. After they finished eating, Armin paid the bill. The woman tried to stop him, her hands trembling again, her pride fighting her desperation. I will repay you, she said urgently. I promise. I just need some time. Armin shook his head. You don't owe me anything. But, he looked at her calmly. Just take care of your son. That's enough. For the first time, the woman truly looked at him. Not as a stranger. Not as a source of food. But as a human being. They stood to leave. The boy bowed awkwardly, copying something he must have seen in a cartoon. Thank you, uncle. Armin smiled and patted his head. They stepped outside into the cold night. Armin thought that would be the end of it. He was wrong. 2 weeks passed, life continued in its usual rhythm of work, exhaustion, and solitude. Armin returned to the same restaurant often, always choosing the corner table, always eating alone, but something had changed. He found himself looking toward the door more often. Listening for soft footsteps. Watching for tired eyes that reminded him of that night. Then, one evening, as rain poured down in heavy sheets, the door opened again. They were back. The boy rushed inside first, his face bright with excitement. The mother followed, soaked from the rain, nervously scanning the room until she saw Armin. Her face lit up with relief. They approached his table. Sir, she said, trying to steady her voice, we didn't come for food today. Armin raised an eyebrow. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small, neatly folded bundle of money. It couldn't have been much. Probably everything she had. I found work cleaning houses, she said softly. It's not much, but today I was paid. I want to return what you gave us. Armin looked at the money, then at her hands, raw, red, trembling. Slowly, he pushed her hand back. You already repaid me, he said. She shook her head. No, sir. I need to do this with dignity. Armin paused. For the first time, he understood something deeper than charity. He understood pride. He understood survival. So he took the money, then he stood up, walked to the counter, ordered 3 full meals, and paid using her money and his. You paid, he said quietly. And so did I. The woman burst into tears. From that day on, they became something like family. They met at the same restaurant almost every week. Sometimes Armin paid. Sometimes she paid. Sometimes they shared. The boy began calling him Uncle Armin with confidence instead of shyness. Armin learned their names. The boy was Sammy. The mother was Layla. Layla told him her story slowly over many evenings. Her husband had died in an accident at a factory. No compensation. No savings. Just debts. She had been forced onto the streets with a child and a fragile hope that tomorrow would somehow be kinder. Armin never spoke much about himself. But slowly, pieces came out. About his sick mother. About the weight he carried. About the dreams he once had and the ones he had buried. Months passed. One evening, Armin arrived at the restaurant and found their usual seats empty. He waited. They didn't come. The next week, still nothing. Days turned into worry. Finally, after nearly a month, Layla returned alone. Her eyes were red. Her face thinner. "Where's Sammy?" Armin asked immediately. She swallowed hard. "He's in the hospital." Armin felt the ground tilt beneath his feet. Sammy had fallen ill. Severe infection. The hospital had demanded money for treatment. Layla had sold everything. Her jewelry. Her clothes. Even the few toys Sammy owned. Still, it wasn't enough. Armin didn't hesitate. The next morning, he went to the hospital. Paid the remaining bills. Bought medicines. Arranged food. When Sammy saw him, the child smiled weakly. "Uncle, you came." Armin sat beside him and took his tiny hand. "Of course I did." Sammy recovered slowly. When he was finally discharged, Layla collapsed in tears at Armin's feet. "I don't know how I will ever repay you," she sobbed. Armin lifted her gently. "Live. Both of you. That's all I ask." Years passed. Sammy grew taller. Stronger. Smarter. He studied hard, inspired by the man who once shared his meal without asking questions. Layla built a small cleaning business. Then another woman joined her. Then another. Armin's mother passed away peacefully one winter night. Layla and Sammy stood beside him at the funeral like true family. Time changed all of them. One day, many years later, Armin received an invitation. It was from Sammy. Graduation ceremony. Armin sat in the crowd with tears in his eyes as Sammy walked across the stage, receiving his scholarship award for engineering. The boy who once stared at a stranger's plate now stood with a future brighter than that restaurant's flickering lights ever were. After the ceremony, Sammy found Armin and hugged him tightly. "Uncle," he said through tears, "that night, when you shared your food, you didn't just feed my stomach. You fed my life." Armin smiled, his own eyes wet. "No, my boy. You fed mine too." Years later, Armin would often return to that same restaurant. Still choosing the corner table, but he never truly ate alone again, because sometimes, the smallest act of kindness creates a family where there was once only hunger and silence, and sometimes, a simple question, "My son's hungry, can we stay a while?" becomes the beginning of a miracle.